Okay, so at this point we have made our bowl. You can carefully take it out of the bag. Just kind of, as you take it out of the bag, you want to kind of put your hand underneath the bottom because, you know, it's fragile still at this point, especially because it's kind of wet. It'll dry out a little as we go, but just carefully take your bag off of it. And then here I am with this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to smooth out and kind of repair anything that needs repairs. I'm going to make sure it's the way that I want it. From here, I think my bowl's pretty good. I like how it looks. So I'm going to move it over to the side and I'm going to start the next step of my juicer here. So I'm going to move that over to the side. Get a new piece of clay, about this size, like a handful. Make sure it's wedged out. So to wedge, you push the clay down and pull it towards you. Push the clay down and pull it towards you. It's best if you stand up. You got to kind of use your body weight for it. And we do this to get air bubbles out of the clay. Air bubbles are not good for the clay. If we just push two pieces of clay together, a lot of times there'll be air in between them, and that air can sort of expand in the kiln and then can break your piece. So it's important to wedge it. Mine's already wedged, so I'm not going to wedge it anymore, but you probably would wedge for like 30 seconds or so. And I'm going to just take a little water, not a ton. I don't want it to be a mud ball, just a little bit of water, and kind of smooth this into a ball. And what I'm going to make next is this number 2 here. So we're jumping around. We're not doing this in any order. This number 2, which is the drill bit. This is what's going to go into the fruit, and it's going to kind of juice that, take the juice out of the fruit. And we're going to use, we're using or sort of reviewing all of our techniques in clay here. So we made our bowl out of coil, and we're going to make this out of a pinch pot. Which you can remember maybe from 5th grade if you were here at Chenery. And a lot of you probably did those in elementary school a bit too, maybe even in other grades. And I can see here that I want my pinch pot to almost be a little pointed at the top. So I'm actually already going to start to shape that. I'm going to keep this in front of me because this really is the goal here. Because we want it to be a little more pointy at the top. Not pointy, like a kind of rounded pointy, but because that'll go, what will be going in like the tiniest lime. You know, you want this to be able to function for all sorts of fruit. So I'm going to kind of just start to shape this down a little. And I can shape it more as I go. But at this point, I'm going to actually take my thumb and I'm going to pinch into here. That I may decide that I want to remove some of this clay, because this is actually a lot of clay. When we make a pinch pot, this ends up coming out a bit. So we're going to start with a pinch pot. And I just grabbed some of these kinds of loop tools, which can help us scoop extra clay out if we need to. So I'm going to keep those handy. And as I come up here, I'm going to press my thumb into the center and just start to pinch around. And it's important with pinch pots that if you see a crack start to form, you take a little water on your hands, tap it on the fabric, and just use the smallest bit of water to smooth those cracks as you go. And then pinch again. So don't start pinching like, the whole thing out and then have a billion cracks in it and not be able to get it back. Really be inspecting it as you go, because cracks are going to happen, but they won't get out of control if you smooth them as you go and add a little bit of water to them. And I'm going to keep pinching around. And I'm looking at this shape. I'm going for this shape. I'm thinking about my bowl too. So I'll bring the bowl back into view here. I'm thinking about my bowl too. I want this to kind of sit in the middle of this bowl like this does here. So you want to kind of keep the bowl next to you as you do this. You're using your thumb on the inside and your finger on the outside to kind of start to get this shape. In a pinch pot, you want it to be consistent, like a consistent thickness. So whatever thickness I'm pinching with here, I want to be doing that as I come down too. Now, one thing you might run into here, like I'm running into, is, oh my gosh, I've pinched a lot here. I really like the shape of this, but I've got all this extra clay in here, and I don't love that for this. So I'm just going to kind of size this out. Yeah, I kind of like where this is going, but I don't want it to get too much bigger. I could probably bring it out a little more at the base. I want it to be kind of like a peaked mountain, kind of coming down. And it does kind of look like a mountain. I know a lot of you have asked, how can we make these into something, like make them a little more fancy? Let's add some details at the end, but we can start to think about that a bit, because, you know, shapes are going to emerge in this sort of, you know, this particular design is decided for us because of the function. But I am seeing a mountain in mine, so, you know, you might see something as you go. Use that imagination, and I might sort of go with that. Maybe I'll add some clouds, or, you know, kind of make it feel a little more like a landscape later, or with my color choices or whatever. So let's see. I like that. I like that because there's room for the fruit around it. I might bring it out a little bit more at the bottom, just like this here. Uh-oh. I'm watching for those cracks. A crack emerged, so I'm using a little water and getting that out there. And then cracks are starting to emerge some more because I haven't added water in a while. Tapping my fingers a lot because I just want a touch of water on here. And because I think this is growing quite a bit and I don't want it to be too big. So let's see. That's pretty good. This one here, to kind of come in here, and that one's not going to work. We need these ones that have like a sharp edge on them. So have some little dry clay on them, but there's a sharp edge. It's almost like, oh, you can't see that. It's almost like a knife on the edge there. Those are the ones you want to kind of come in and take out some ribbons of clay. And you've got to go gently at first because you don't want to put a hole in your piece, but you can take these cool ribbons of clay out. And that just makes it, you know, so if you pinch it, it gets wider. But if you don't want it to get wider, maybe you do this instead and just take some of the clay out with a ribbon tool like this. And I'm going to come in here. I just don't want my clay to be too thick because then my juicer, number one, is really heavy, and number two, could potentially blow up in the kiln. So we need to be careful of that. Just needs to be perfect on the outside. So, you know, if it gets to the end of class and you need to, you can put this in here when you go to put this away. But the next thing you're going to do is you're going to make it function. So if you look here, similar to how these ribbons were taken out on the inside, and there's like some lines there. I don't know if you can see, there's some lines where those ribbons were taken out. That's the same technique that was used here to actually make the drill bit. So you can see how that's like carved out. So I can use a smaller one. I think I'll use a smaller one. And there's not a ton of these, so we need to share them, but that's a smaller one. And I can use this, keeping this in front of me and using it as my model. I can kind of come down here, and maybe I actually make it like a drill bit, how it comes around the side. And that's pretty cool. I think I'm going to come in with the other side, which is a little flatter. So you might have to experiment with these tools a little. And I'm going to bring in it a little more. So there's one part. And then you can kind of, this sort of kicks up a burr of clay. So you can kind of smooth that down a bit. Then I'll come next to it at the top here, clean out your tool each time so it doesn't leave more clay than it needs. So I'm going to use a pin tool or a toothpick to just clean this out here. It can be a little tricky sometimes. Then take this again, and again I'm going to come at an angle. I'm going to try to keep them close to each other because I do want those to do well drilling into my fruit. That one I dug kind of almost like too deep. I mean, it's going to be fine, but I would suggest not pushing as hard as I did there. Okay, and we're going to have to come in and clean this up a bit afterwards, but there's 2 lines. I probably would have brought it closer to this one too, but it is what it is. It's alright. Then I'm going to turn it this way